Her research focuses on the interface between globalization, trade, FDI, and economic development in emerging markets, particularly in Asia. Professor Agarwal's research explores the growing complexities in economic relations, seeks to explain them from a sustainability perspective, and draw policy implications. So Professor Agarwal has a wealth of experience in policy and academic research. She is, along with her current duties, she is also an international consultant on special economic zones and economic corridors at the Asian Development Bank. And she is also a senior editor of the International Journal of Emerging Markets. And previously, she has been the policy director at the Wadhwani Foundation Policy Research Center, the senior research fellow at the National Council of Applied Economic Research, associate professor at the Department of Business Economics and Delhi University, reader at the Institute of Economic Growth, and a senior fellow at the Indian Council of Research in International Economic Relations. She holds a PhD and MPhil from the Delhi School of Economics. So I now invite Professor Agarwal to present her book on special economic zones in South Asia, structural change, competitiveness, and growth. Over to you, Professor Agarwal.
So thank you, Professor Sanket Mohapatra. Thank you for this opportunity. And it's really my pleasure to present this book for the first time in the public, and also to present my study, which is already published, which forms a part of this book. So let me start with the presentation right away without any ado. This presentation actually is in two parts. Part one will introduce the upcoming book with the same title as the title of this presentation, that is Special Economic Zones in South Asia, Structural Change, Competitiveness and Growth. And part two actually will focus on one of the chapters of this book. It is chapter 12 of the book. It addresses the question, how special are special economic zones in South Asia? It is already published in the World Economy, and the reference is given here at the bottom. Let me start with the presentation of this book, first of all. So this is the book. Routledge actually is publishing this book. And it is expected to be launched in February. To be very specific, 29th February is the date that they have set out. This book actually is this book was conceptualized in 2017. But due to various other responsibilities, I could not really start that in that year. 2020, I happened to get the fellowship from the foundation of Riksbanken in Sweden, and it was along with a team from Kiel Institute of World Economy and other institutes in Ghana and Vietnam. So there was a research consortium that we formed. And as part of that funding, this book is done. So I'm really pleased to introduce the book to you today.
Professor Agarwal, can I request you to make it full screen?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. Yeah, actually, I've been working on special economic zones for the past 20 years. And I tell you that there is a vast difference in working on special economic zones in India and other countries. And the difference is that in India, these special economic zones, the notion of special economic zones is, I think, one of the most hated notion. So far as the development discourse is concerned, people don't really see them as a tool of development. Whereas what my experience has been is that in other countries, wherever I have gone, I found that there is so much of seriousness about developing special economic zones and about promoting them and really promoting investment through them. So I have traveled across the world, in fact, and I've seen several special economic zones in Asia and other countries. So I actually have been to South Asian countries, I have been to Central Asian countries, and then I have been to some of these European zones. And I really feel quite fascinated by the way they are being developed, they are being conceptualized in many of these countries. And that is my inspiration to continue to work on special economic zones, to be very frank. So there is a sort of increasing prominence of special economic zones as a development policy across the globe. According to a study from UNCTAD, this is World Investment Report to be very specific, they have come up with a figure of 5,383 special economic zones around the world, with 500 in the pipeline. On the other hand, we have World Free Zone Organization, which is based out of Dubai, and they actually have come up with this figure of 7,000 SEZs. So the number of SEZs across the world lies somewhere between these two numbers. So this is how we interpret that. Both advanced and developing countries have their special economic zones. In advanced countries, these are commercial special economic zones. That is, they are the free trade zones which actually promote transshipment trade. So these are the places where you can do some basic activities which do not change the HS code of the product, and then you transport them further to the destination of the destination of the exports. Developing countries, on the other hand, have production-oriented special economic zones where there are processing activities done. And this is actually seen as a tool to promote structural transformation. In fact, why the world is going crazy for special economic zones is the fact that special economic zones can facilitate structural transformation. There is a growing recognition that growth is sustainable, or can be sustained if it is accompanied with structural transformation. Structural transformation means shift of resources from low value added activities to high value added activities or high productivity sectors. And for that, actually, industrialization is the sector which is underlying the whole concept of structural transformation. So the shift of resources from agriculture to industry actually is considered as a shift of resources from low to high value added activities. When we talk about industrialization, it is not merely about manufacturing. This is what I have made very clear in the book. It is because there is increasing servicification of the manufacturing sector, and therefore we also include high value added services when we talk about industrialization. Now, industrialization is a very complicated process, and it requires massive economic and technological transformation, which is very difficult because the developed countries' firms are already at the technology frontiers, and developing countries' firms find it very difficult to compete with those firms in the world market. So there has to be some way to really promote export-oriented industrialization in developing countries. And the smart way is to participate in GVCs. So I think much has been written on GVCs. I don't have to tell what the GVCs are about. But the fact is that, and a lot of literature has come on how the participation into GVCs can promote industrialization, and it's a smart way of industrialization in developing countries. So most countries are now racing to get into these GVCs. Now, but the participation levels of different countries remain very different. Some countries are doing very well, while the others are really lagging behind. So there is literature on the factors that lead to the country's access to GVCs. And many of these studies actually focus on national competitiveness. So they actually focus on national factors of competitiveness for participation in GVCs. However, there is an emerging thought which says that it is not about the national competitiveness, it is about regional economies. So there are regions which are highly competitive, and these are the regions which can attract investment which is GVC linked. There is an expert who actually calls this globe, the entire world, as regional world, because according to this author, it's all about regional economies. The globalization actually unfolds into the regions which are highly competitive in a country. And this is a fact. If you go to Malaysia, you find that there are two regions which are doing very well. In Indonesia, Philippines, everywhere you go and you find that there are one or two regions which are doing very well and which are actually driving the growth and competitiveness of the economy. The rest of the economy is not really doing well. And now the focus is on how to bring that balance. But the fact remains that these regional economies are multiplying over the years. And these regional economies actually are driven by, in many countries, special economic zones. And these economic zones, special economic zones, they have become instrumental in promoting these regional economies and in driving global value change. I'm sorry. So because of the fact that they are instrumental in attracting GVC-linked investment, countries are actually getting passionately involved in developing these zones. So there is a proliferation of economic zones for this region, for this reason. But along with the proliferation of SEZs, SEZ literature has also proliferated. And not only that it is proliferated, but it has also evolved over the years. The objectives, the data, methodologies, everything has evolved over time. If you compare this literature, most earlier studies, they focused on, for instance, static impacts of special economic zones. But now the focus is increasingly on spillover effects of special economic zones. It is facilitated by nightlight data and micro data. So many of these countries and many of these experts actually are using household consumption data. They are using health data. They are using farm level data, farm level census data for assessing the impact of special economic zones on the regional economies. There is increasing use of quantitative methods. So lots of studies have recently come which are actually focusing on these spillover effects. They are also called dynamic effects of special economic zones. Some of the studies that I have listed here, they are the ones for India. And if you look at those studies, only one study actually is published in a journal. Others are in a working paper. And I will come back to that actually, why it is so. If you go to the next slide, we find that there are limitations of these studies. And the limitation is that there is scarcity of data. That is the primary limitation. So it is very difficult to get the actual data on special economic zones. So there are quantitative analysis. They are using nightlight data. They are using micro data, but that data is not the actual data. Now, for instance, I have used the National Household Survey data. And National Household Survey data actually stops at district level data. It doesn't go down to village level. It doesn't go down to mandal level data. So that's where the limitation comes, because you are using district level data. And district is much wider than the special economic zones. And sometimes they also, two districts together actually have one special economic zone. So it is very difficult to sometimes justify the data. And I tell you that I really had to push. I mean, I really had to try so many journals to get this article published. But then there are other articles. For instance, the second article that is by my students, it's a master's thesis, and it was actually inspired by my own presentation in the institute. And this is also in the working form, and they have used the National Family Health Survey data. So that also stops at district level. Then we have this study from Boston University, And this Boston University data, actually, they have used the economic census data, and their data is also at the district level. So it is about production data, but then it is at the district level. And then we have this Alina data, Alina and Holger. Now, this is interesting because they have geocoded information on special economic zones and geocoded information on special economic zone firms. So this they have found out from their software. But then once they identified those firms, which may not be actually the firms in SEZs, it is only through the geocoded software that they got that. And then they compare those firms. They took the data on those firms from Provis database. Now, Provis database is not the enterprise level database. It is the database at firm level, and firm actually can have many plants. So this is where the problems come, because it's a combined data, it's an integrated data. It doesn't really reflect what is happening in those plants which are in special economic zones. So I seriously doubt the results that are given by this data. So what I mean to say here is that data is a huge problem in special economic zone studies, especially when we are, whatever aspect we look at, there is a problem because I've been working on this since 2003, and I find that it is very difficult to really get a kind of data for quantitative analysis, because for quantitative analysis, you have to have a kind of chunk of data to get some results. So firm level data is rare, and it is actually confined. The firm level analysis is confined to two countries, Poland and China. Here you have the firm level data available for special economic zones. So most studies that are published, they are coming from these. Of course, there are studies published from other sources like Nightlight database studies also. But I find that quite a few studies are on Poland and China, where you have a lot of data available, but other countries are not that much represented. So what I mean to say is that there is an evolution of literature. People are going beyond static benefits to dynamic benefits, but first they are adopting a piecemeal approach where they are focusing only one of the other aspects, but more importantly, the actual data is missing. So they are using proxies, and these proxies may actually go wrong. So this is why we need a study we need some database actually to conduct some study which gives us the kind of feel of what is happening in special economic zones. And I feel that this study, where I have used available database, is a step towards that. So that's what actually is what the book is offering. So this book is contributing in two ways. First, it presents a systematic theory-based impact assessment of the SEZ policy in South Asia. And then it employs both qualitative and quantitative tools for the analysis. The highlight of the study is the use of counterfactual approach for impact evaluation of SEZs on investment climate, firms' competitiveness, their technological activities, and social and environmental effects. And all this analysis actually is based on the firm level data, and how I get the firm level data and how I've used it, that is what I will briefly tell you. But first, let us talk about South Asia. Why I chose to focus on South Asia. First of all, I'm in charge of South Asian studies in my department. So I am actually looking at the research on South Asia. And I was very surprised that when I talked about South Asia, not many people exactly knew what the South Asia was. So therefore, actually, I always start with this first line. That is, South Asia comprises of these countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, 8 countries, Bhutan, Indonesia, in India. And the reason is that before SAARC, this region was not really constructed. So even now, if you look at the UN data, they have Iran included in Southern Asia. So there are some issues there. So, but I am focusing on these 8 countries, and 4 major economies, that is Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. They started their SEZs in the previous and last century. They have been among the early adopters of special economic zones, which were called export processing zones earlier, which is a kind of traditional version of contemporary special economic zones. Most of these countries, they have now come up with new variety of special economic zones, which are larger, which are better equipped with investment, and which are more ambitious in terms of sectoral composition and the economic activity in them. The remaining 4 minor economies, they also have their respective special economic zones legislation, and they have also identified locations for them, but not all of them are actually operational at the moment. And it is very surprising. I mean, actually, I was really very happy to see that Afghanistan, the new regime in Afghanistan, is really trying to promote special economic zones, and they are really trying to have that, they are creating that kind of goodwill in the market to attract investment in their special economic zones. They're very serious about it. So I met some of these representatives in Dubai, and I found that how keen they were to really attract investment in their special economic zone. So the study is timely because it can offer some evidence-based recommendation in promoting special economic zones effectively. So this is the reason that I thought that it is a good idea to focus on South Asia, in addition to the fact that I am actually looking at South Asia, and I am from South Asia, and I have developed several contexts here across the region. The study is based on policy evaluation approach, and here we have I have conducted process assessment of the policy as well as outcome assessment. Now, when it comes to process assessment, I have looked at the development challenges that need to be addressed in these economies, and the rationale of choosing the policy option, the special economic zone as the policy option. I have looked at the fit between the SEZ policy and the overall development strategy, and the fit between the goals and the policy design. So these are some of the aspects that I have covered under process assessment, and I will just explain in my next slide what actually I have done there. And then outcome assessment actually it has picked up certain indicators of SEZ performance and immediate outcome, such as investment climate, export competitiveness, technology and innovation, production linkages, and labor and environment effects. From there, actually, I try to conclude how, given these outcomes, how these SEZs have impacted on structural transformation. So the overall impact assessment is based on my outcome assessment. And then I explain that in terms of the process assessment. So this is the kind of strategy that I have adopted. The study is organized into 3 parts. First is identifying. Part 1 actually is about identifying development challenges, and here I have taken growth acceleration. I have explained how growth acceleration in South Asia after 1991 is not really sufficient to push this region to close the gap with the developed countries, how the gap between the region and the developed world has been growing despite growth acceleration. In fact, those who are tracking this, they must be knowing that a lot of literature has come to show that South Asia is one of the fastest growing regions since 1991. In fact, I found that it is the fastest growing region for a long time. But yet, the gap between the developed world and the region has been growing, and they are not even closing it with the developing countries, the fast growing developing countries or the high income upper middle income countries. So that is the problem there. So actually, I try to show why it is so and what are the strategies. And I have actually looked at each and every country there and shown how the development strategy that has led to this growth acceleration and how that is not really sufficient for growth to have happened. And high growth rate is due to low base. So for instance, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and India, they are into the global value chains in those sectors where they have competitive advantage, whereas other countries like uh, Bhutan is growing because of their hydropower strategy, hydropower plants. And then we have Nepal, which is growing because of growing remittances. Tourism has always been there, but the growth in remittances has been just amazing over the years. And then we have Pakistan, Maldives, and Afghanistan. These countries actually are showing, I mean, Pakistan and Maldives, they are showing downward trends so far as growth is concerned. Maldives actually grew very rapidly in the 80s, but then by mid-90s, they actually started slowing down. Their growth was due to their tourism strategy. So this is actually how I have explained and show how that strategy could not really bring about the wider growth. It remained limited. It remained restricted to the sector where the growth initiated, the growth was triggered. So that's how I have tried to explain that. Then structural transformation also remained limited. Of course, there is structural transformation. There is a decline in the share of agricultural GDP as well as the share of agricultural employment, but still a very large proportion of people are stuck in agriculture. If you see Nepal or Bhutan, so almost 50 to 60% people are there in agriculture only. So this is how the structural transformation has also been slow, and this has pulled down their competitiveness. Export basket is very limited, and this export basket it is not diversified, and it is not upgraded to the extent it should. So of course, there are pockets of growth somewhere in some sectors, but it is not really leading to the high growth rates in exports or the kind of wider export growth. So this is how I have explained the development challenges, that they have to have high growth rate, they have to accelerate their growth rate, and this growth has to be accompanied with structural transformation, because the triggers uh, are not really leading to that kind of structural transformation. And I have explained how, despite the fact that India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, they got into the value chains, they got stuck. India is stuck into services. Manufacturing, it is not able to promote. Bangladesh is stuck in ready-made. 85% of their exports actually has come from that sector alone. And they are heavily dependent on imports for everything that they are producing in the country. Then if you look at Sri Lanka also got stuck with the textile sector. They tried to diversify it and got some diversification, but it did not really go very far. And now they actually have they took a major step to promote service economy, and the service economy led to some projects which were very costly, and you know what happened after that, because they got into debt because of those projects, and finally the economy got tanked. So, well, actually, and similarly, I talked about Maldives, which remained stuck to tourism, could not really diversify the economy. Then we have Nepal, which is growing because of remittances, and the financial services, because financial services are linked with remittances. Otherwise, they are not really uh, uh, competitive. They are not really competitive in any other sector. So somewhere, these triggers have to diversify they have to be widened and broadened, and they have to diversify these economies. So I think this is what I have mentioned in this. So how the SEZs can help. So that is my second part. And whether this policy is really the policy that can actually bring about the kind of growth that is expected. That is what I have discussed in my second part, that is the process evaluation. So first chapter in the second part is about understanding special economic zones, how they are different from other economic zones, how they have grown, and what are the underlying mechanisms through which they can bring about growth and structural transformation and competitiveness. And then I talked about the rationale of special economic zones in South Asia, because special economic zones cannot succeed in all the countries. There are some national factors, for instance, the geography, for instance, the factor endowment. These are the factors that actually can kill special economic zones. For instance, if there is resource curse, then manufacturing in special economic zones is also affected equally as the manufacturing outside. So this has been the experience. So I have shown that how South Asia actually is blessed with the kind of location that it has, how they don't have any resource curves, and how the institutions are the one that are really growth constraining. So it is very important to address these institutions. So this chapter actually is about the key factors underlying the kind of growth that South Asia has had. Then I actually talked about the special economic zones. For each country, I talked about the evolution of special economic zone policy and how it is aligned with the development strategy, and whether it is actually internalized into development strategy. And here, actually, I want to say, I have said that yes, the SEZ objectives have evolved over time, but the thing is that the policy is not really got into the development strategy. It is not internalized as part of the overall development strategy. So it remains peripheral to the whole process of development. And I think that is where, and countries are not very serious about special economic zones, because there is flip-flop approach in many of these countries, most of these countries, I would say, except Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been very serious about it. It has been working, it has learned in its own way, and it has evolved, and it is now developing 100 special economic zones. But that too, actually, I have criticized how 100 economic zones may not really be the right way of going about it, and how how the country need to really focus its resources, because it's a small country and totally dependent on imports. So it has to really, and the resources are not many, as we know that even after COVID, they had to borrow money from the IMF. So this is where actually I have mentioned that the SEZ policy needs to be very much aligned, uh, and it has to be a kind of stable policy, because any fluctuation, any change in the policy can actually affect the confidence of investors and can kill the policy. Then I also talked about the objectives and design. Policy objectives actually are to promote infrastructure in most countries and to bring foreign investment, to bring private investment in the development of infrastructure. So yes, so from that perspective, we find that now the SEZs are growing larger, they are becoming more equipped with better resources and things like that. But one thing is that if you look at their legal documents, we do not find any special treatment that is given to special economic zones. They are more about about infrastructure development. So I mean, and as I will talk in my next part also, that the basic purpose of special economic zones is to provide special legal and regulatory regime. This is very important to understand, because otherwise you can have general economic zones. So what is the problem? If you have industrial zones, if you have industrial estates, industrial parks, so why you want to have special economic zones? This is because you want to give them something special. So that special benefit of of the of special regulatory regime. That is not really seen. Bangladesh actually has tried by putting an option in their law saying that the SEZs can be exempted from 16 laws. But actually, it is not really done. They have actually exempted the SEZs from the labor laws, but labor laws also need to be compatible with the labor laws. So it is not about actually relaxing the laws. It is about giving some special treatment and by making the ease of doing business possible. So that's what we will be coming up with. Uh, Outcome evaluation is on impact in investment climate, export competitiveness, technology. So I have identified the indicators for all of them, and I have tried to see how the special economic zone firms are doing better than the firms or not doing better than the firms outside the zones. So this is what actually here I have shown. And what I have found is that uh, they haven't done well so far as the first four are concerned, that is investment climate, export competitiveness, transfer, and the knowledge spillovers. The success has been very limited. But when it comes to labor and environment, I found that here they are doing better. Now, this is something which not many people can accept, but this is what the results have shown. And I have my explanation why this is happening this way in the book. So this is about the book where actually my key argument is that special economic zones, the rationale of setting up special economic zones need to be understood. They are there to really experiment, they have to be policy experimental labs. Now, if you are not experimenting with newer policies, newer institutions in them, then there is no point in having special economic zones. Very expensive policy. It's not easy to implement special economic zones which are successful because you have to give a kind of concentrated package of resources. So it is important that uh, don't adopt piecemeal approach and really try to make them successful by making them experimental labs, or you don't have them. You can promote special economic zones simply. So that's not, because the whole idea is to promote agglomeration. So if it is only about infrastructure, then we can have updated industrial estates. And I tell you that in Pakistan, uh, the Special Economic Zone Act has come. New special economic zones are coming, but they are nothing but upgraded industrial estate. They set up their industrial estates in the 60s, and now they are upgrading it under the special economic zones. So this is what they are doing. So, but they call them special economic zones for the reasons which are not really uh, justified, I would say. So now let me come to part 2 of my presentation, where I can show you what I really want to say. This this is chapter 12 of the book, and it is asking the question, it is addressing the question, are special economic zones adequately equipped to offer business conditions that is different from what is existing in the rest of the economy? That is the basic research question, and it is a quantitative analysis that I have conducted. Professor Sanket, you please let me know about the time, because I think I don't have that. How much time I'm left with?
We can continue for another 10 minutes.
That's it, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So let me then be a little faster. Actually, I have, to address this question, I have shown how institutions are very important. They are the fundamental factors of growth. So there is a there is a myriads of growth factors that are given in the literature, but it is about institutions that are, according to the recent thought, which is actually led by Roderick and Acemoglu. These are the famous experts. I'm sure everybody knows about them. So they are the ones who actually have shown that the fundamental and that cause fundamental factors that cause growth are institutions. So other factors are just proximate. Now, the developing countries actually are facing numerous growth constraining institutions which inhibit uh, private investment and growth. Now, one would say that formal institutions, that is the policies, can change quickly through government orders. Then why their institutions are not really changing? And the reason is that institutions are interdependent. They are locked in an arrangement with informal institutions. Informal institutions are very slow to change, and therefore it is very difficult to change the economic institutions, because then there will be a conflict of interest between various actors. So this entire institutional arrangement, which is called institutional equilibrium, that gets disturbed. If there is any question, I will definitely like to answer, but 10 minutes actually I have to finish this presentation. So any attempt to radically transform this formal institutions can disturb the equilibrium and can harm the economy. So therefore, it is very difficult to change the institutions rapidly, and therefore institutions are called sticky, and it is reflected in the ease of doing business. Despite all these years, if you look at in most cases in South Asia, you find that uh, our ranking, whether it is in Bangladesh, India, or Pakistan, our ranking has been quite low. In India, actually, we have jumped many ranks over the past few years. But then there are certain aspects of businesses which need attention, and this is where I have marked them. So our ranking has been very low. Special economics, how I'm trying to how this analysis is related with special economic zones, because special economic zones are the special areas where specialized institutional regimes can be implemented without disturbing the equilibrium in the economy. So they are the small areas. They are the kind of jurisdiction within the national jurisdiction where you can offer some specialized institutional regime which is different from the rest of the country, and therefore they are set up so they can be instrumental in addressing the growth constraining institutions. And that is why special economic zones are important, and this is how they are made special. And this is what my point was when I was talking about the book earlier. So they actually offer specialized institution along with good infrastructure, range of specialized business services and good locations, and they can guarantee good investment climate, and good investment climate is directly linked with the investment, in particular the GVC investment. So therefore, I tested this hypothesis that SEZs or EPZs, they offer an investment climate which is distinctly different from the rest of the economy. So the focus of this study has been on South Asia, as you all know, and here I've tried to show what is the scope of the study. India actually develops only special economic zones. The earlier EPZ regime is now subsumed in special economic zones. So we have only one regime, that is special economic zones. But Bangladesh and Pakistan, they are operating two different regimes. Their erstwhile EPZs are still continuing. And in addition, they have started their special economic zones, both Pakistan and Bangladesh. So this is a sort of profile that I have given. Now you must be wondering how I am conducting this study. What is a database? Where I am getting the database? Of course, I haven't conducted any survey because survey has its limitations, and I can't cover so many firms to really and so many SEZs to get the data on special economic zone for this quantitative analysis. So what I have done is I have taken this enterprise survey data. Enterprise survey data of 2013-14. It has given an information on the location of firms, whether they are in special economic zones or they are outside it. And they actually have three options: export processing zones, industrial zones, and outside these zones. So this is how they have identified. I have taken the two groups: firms which are in SEZs and firms which are not in SEZs. So this is the data that I have. This pertains to 2013-14, but actually this analysis is valid till today because analysis is supplemented with my recent interviews with the officials of SEZs across all the countries that I have covered, including Pakistan. So I find that the institutions are sticky and there is not much change in the way the special economic zones are functioning. So my findings are validated through these interviews recently. And I also must tell you that the latest enterprise surveys of South Asia have come, but they don't have this variable any longer. So this is the year when I had this information and I thought I could use it for my study. And this is actually something when I realized, I thought I must try to look at it. Variable construction. So this enterprise surveys actually has two types of questions: experience-based, which provide actual information, and perception-based, which actually are the perception of the respondent. So each question I have transformed into a variable irrespective of whether it is experience-based or perception. I also wanted to check perception. In some cases, I use composite variables and I constructed them using the statistical techniques. Three types of variables are actually identified: institutions, infrastructure, and utilities, off-site locational advantages of special economic zones. COSI experimental designs are used. COSI experimental designs actually are about matching and weighting. So matching methods are several if you look at the literature, but two methods are most commonly used: Mahalanobis distance model and propensity score matching method. But there are some recent studies which have shown that propensity score matching, which is based on the propensity score, they are not as good, and they can produce biased results as compared with Mahalanobis distance model, which actually is based on the direct distance between the variables, between the two groups. So I used the nearest neighbor matching method based on Mahalanobis distance model. And this is doubly adjusted for robust estimators. In addition, I have used inverse propensity score, the inverse propensity weighting method. It is like a weighted regression method, and the weights are given to the covariates, and the weights are calculated through or estimated through covariate balancing propensity score. So method, and they ensure that there is a balance between the treatment and control group. So they actually minimize the bias which is there in propensity score. So this is the regression model that I have used, where the alpha is the constant, beta is the effect of EPZ, and other covariates which are weighted. They are controlled. Now, as I said, that three sets of variables. So first set is about institutions. So I have taken to begin with the governance. And I have actually identified the 6 categories of governance variables using the World Bank definition of governance. So regulatory quality, effective governance, absence of corruption, rule of law, voice and accountability, and political stability. So I have actually tried to see the correspondence between the questions and these aspects of governance. Then actually I have the second set of institutional variables focus on fiscal, trade, and labor regimes. So I have given these, I have identified these questions which correspond to, for instance, tax regime, number of times the inspectors came, number of inspections where the informal payments were expected, how are the obstacles, and how much is are the tax rates obstacle, and how much is the obstacle presented by the tax administration, and things like that. So for every aspect of these regime, we have corresponding questions. We have identified corresponding questions. And then on-site infrastructure and utilities, I have taken electricity, water, telecommunication, and storage. Then off-site infrastructure and factor availability, again, we found a number of variables, number of questions that could lead to this answer about the transport as obstacles and access to factors of production and inputs as obstacles. So let me just now wind up, because I'm sure that Professor Mohapatra must be waiting for me to finish. So the conclusion is that the results vary, of course, across the 3 countries. The results are, I have 2 sets of results for 48 variables for all these three countries. So I'm not presenting the results because it is very, very heavy. I mean, result heavy kind of article. So I'm just presenting the conclusion. The conclusion is that the SEZs in South Asia could not overcome the basic challenge of weak governance, poor quality governance. India's upgraded SEZs, they show somewhat better performance, but I do not find the results to be robust because we did the two different methodologies to see whether the results are robust or not. Bangladesh actually is highly committed, as I said earlier, to special economic zones, and they are managed. They have managed to actually provide good on-site infrastructure and particularly reliable electricity, fiscal incentive, custom facilitation, but nothing beyond that. Pakistan actually is focusing mainly on fiscal incentives. That is where they turn out to be competitive, and they actually charge. The very attractive feature of their EPZs is that they just charge a presented tax rate of just 1%. That is what the highlight of their special economic zones. Of course, labor laws, they call that production oriented labor laws. That is also another thing, but I'll come to that. So uh, India's second generation private SEZs, which we know we have, they have the advanced features, and they have given definite edge to our special economic zones in terms of infrastructure, good location, and custom facilitation. But the challenges of weak governance and other institutions facing the country largely remain unaddressed. I think this is something which is the crux of this this chapter, as well as the whole book as well. We find that administrative efficiency, simplification, and corruption continue to be the challenge. Actually, we find that many people, actually, like Arvind Panagaraya, has talked so much about labor laws as the constraint of India's growth, but actually that is not the thing. It is the corruption which is a major challenge for South Asia, and this is what every firm actually I have shown how the more than 70% firms actually say that corruption is number one challenge in this region. So even that is not really addressed. Tax incentives, they have overcome tax rates as the obstacle, but in Bangladesh and Pakistan, but tax administration still remains a problem. Custom clearances are streamlined, but custom regulations remain an issue. Labor laws are relaxed in implementation, at least, but then the zone investors do not see any distinct advantage in labor. In fact, this is a universal result where I found that they find labor laws more restrictive in SEZ. So SEZ, the investors find labor laws more restrictive than the outside firm. So this is what I found universally positive across the countries, except yes, in Pakistan it is not significant because their outside labor laws are also relaxed, and this is I'm not saying that, I'm quoting it from EU report 2017. Yes, there are some good results in some bright spots in effective governance and in India, but my interviews and my visits to some of these zones show that it is because the private management has taken the initiatives to really work as the kind of intermediary between the state agencies and the companies. So therefore, in some cases, we find that the companies are very happy, are happier in the SEZs than outside, so far as their interaction with the government is concerned. But otherwise, uh, if you corruption also, we found that companies said that they are facing lesser corruption in SEZs, but when it comes to payoffs, then we find that the payoffs are larger in SEZ. So the results are not that good so far as institutions are concerned. So what we find is that despite the long history, continuity, and evolution of SEZs in South Asia, the SEZs could not be insulated from the general institutional context in which they are embedded, and they just then defy the underlying principle of setting up the SEZs. most countries actually are replicating the success of China. So what they are doing essentially is they are now having large size SEZs with good infrastructure, good location, fiscal deficit, business services, etc. But what is neglected is that that special the special benefit actually remains neglected, and firms keep struggling to find their way through. This is what actually I have seen. I'm working for Bangladesh actually, and I interviewed many of these agencies, and I find that it is very difficult, and they agree that it is very difficult to have that single window clearances in the country, despite all those commitment and that passion about special economic zones. So what we find is that private zones are set up, enhanced facilities are given, but the results are not really good. There are gaps in policy promises and actual benefits. And I have actually talked about this earlier also. The policy is expensive, and government should refrain from implementing several zones simultaneously. And they should focus on providing what they promise. And there should not be any piecemeal approach in that. There are gaps in perceived and actual benefits. This is what we also found. And this could be perhaps because there are overly optimistic expectations created by the government. For instance, labor laws. So labor laws in implementation are said to be relaxed, but actually we do not find any evidence of the fact that it is so. And the companies do not really feel that. Actually, they feel that they are more stringent there in SEZs. So finally, what I have said here is that SEZs are expensive to implement. It is possible that their implementation delays actual industrialization, because actual industrialization requires like skilled labor. And this is what actually I have found in one of the results, that skilled labor is a major problem for special economic zones. So it really finds the promotion of technology, the promotion of productivity, the promotion of skills in the economy. So it is possible that a lot of diversion of resources to infrastructure can actually can lead to the drop in the resources to these important aspects of growth. So it is important that when we set up special economic zones, we should be able to leverage their development potential to the full. Otherwise, it may be a very expensive strategy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Aradhana Agarwal, for a very enlightening and interesting presentation. What was also interesting is that it's based on rigorous evidence. It's a very rigorous study with the latest possible techniques, and the results are quite interesting as well. I would like to open up the floor to questions now. So Murugan has a question. I'll maybe promote him to a panelist. Murugan, are you able to talk? Murugan?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Ma'am, thanks for the wonderful presentation. Just wanted to understand, because there was mentioning about SEs brought some effective changes on the labor. I really wanted to understand what was the positive impact on improving the working condition of workers in the SE zone, because there are numerous reports which talks of negative working condition in SEZ zones.
Yes, so shall I answer, or will you collect the questions? How should I go about? Shall I answer this question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, this question, I was expecting this question, because I myself was really surprised to see this. So one possibility is that, one result is that the share of temporary workers is less in Bangladesh and Pakistan, so far as SEZs are concerned. In India, it is the same. Second result that I found is that the length of the work period for the temporary workers is also shorter in SEZs. Outside, it is higher. So these are the significant results, especially for Actually, the second one is significant for all of the country, for all three countries. The share of temporary workers actually is lower in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So these are the two things that I can see. And actually what I have, and then there is the perception, there is a direct question asked to these people, whether you think that labor is a major obstacle. So when I tested these responses, I found that more SEs, significantly more entrepreneurs in SEZs said that it is a significant obstacle as compared with the outside. And actually, I was talking to some people and some experts, law legal people, and they told me that it is because, I mean, I don't know how far it is true, but they say that, it is very difficult to monitor labor laws in the rest of the economy. And it is actually difficult to sometimes implement them, so you have the laws, but the implementation is a problem. Whereas in special economic zones, whatever are the laws, they can be monitored. So even in Bangladesh, they have a special labor laws in SEZs, unlike India or Pakistan. I mean, for this actually, Pakistan also has special regime. But Bangladesh is a very glaring example because they are a successful countries and their labor laws made a lot of noise. World Bank got involved and many agencies, this ILO got involved. And so they have a special law. So one country has two different laws on labor. And yet we find that the entrepreneurs are not happy. So my explanation to this is that they are being monitored there, whereas the rest of the economy, it is very difficult to have that capacity and to really to implement and monitor them. So that's what I find. And there is another chapter on labor in my book, which actually is talking about the working conditions, female as well as journal. And there also I find that these results are favorable in SECs. So that I'm not discussing right now because I don't have the results with me, but I do have those results as well. And this is why I say that perhaps SECs can be used to really promote good labor laws and good environmental laws.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me take this opportunity to ask one question. I think one of the points you mentioned is actually very relevant. That is the focus on SEZs, is that actually diverting resources from improving the broader investment climate in a country. And conversely, I mean, should the special status that is given in SEZs, can that be replicated across the country rather than only in these zones?
Actually, that replication point, actually, I said that it is not very easy to change the institutions. Even if you want good economic policies, it is not very easy because, you have all this, sometimes, I mean, I just want, this is something very favorite while I explain this question. Sometimes what we do as management people, we say, and as economics people also, we say global best practices, we identify them. And we say that why don't we have those global best practices in our country? But I am teaching institutional economics, and I tell you that, and I tell that in the class, that it is not possible to have somebody's institutions in your country because the contexts are very different. And you cannot actually import something as economic policy and implement in your country because it requires certain conditions to be satisfied, and those conditions may not be there in your country. So you have to identify what is the best thing for your country given your institutional environment. Just one example, if you have time, which is something which is very favorite to me. It is about the flexicurity system of Denmark. So they have this flexicurity system where you have flexibility in employment as well as you provide security. Flexibility means you have hire and fire policy. But then at the same time, you provide them the social security and you make sure that those people get the employment. through skill upgrading or by waiting, and until then they keep providing them incomes. So this is what the system is. Now this system is very attractive because it doesn't create that social unrest, when you are, and it doesn't really create the kind of situation that the United States have. So this EU was very keen, the European Commission, to implement this system throughout the EU. It never got implemented because the whole system is actually, supporting that flex security system. If those conditions are not satisfied, this huge institutional trust, that is the kind of bottom line. Then you cannot really, so if you bring it in India, I mean, I'm not sure how will be the reaction. So it is not possible to replicate because you need to make changes, and those changes may not be applicable in the rest of the economy. So you create those smaller jurisdiction to see whether they were. So it's a kind of experiment, for any medicine, actually, you do first lab experiment. So you should take it, consider them like this. And first you think, yeah, diversion actually is the worry. And I have seen that because I have traveled to so many countries and visited the SEZs, and I find that huge investment is being done in SEZs with little benefit. The land is lying idle. It is not only in India, let me tell you. It is happening even in Southeast Asia. But there are regional economies of certain regions, for Batam in Indonesia, then you have this Penang and there is one more district in Malaysia. Similarly, Manila in and the way in Philippines. So these are some of the regional economies that actually are doing well, and they are actually driving growth. Otherwise, there are SEZs all over and they are not functioning. So I always felt that developing countries which are resource starved, they need to be more prudent about their development strategies. So to me, actually, it is very important to see that how the human capital can be upgraded. This is my, after seeing all that, this is actually what I feel is very important.
Thank you. We have Shaunak Chakravarti who has a question. Shaunak, are you there? Shaunak, you're on mute. Okay, let me read out the question. He is online.
Yeah.
Yes, Shaunak.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. So my question was similar to what the Professor Mohapatra asked, but with a very specific tone. So the the human capital in South Asia is considered relatively unskilled when compared to East Asia. So is there a cost benefit analysis done, which basically the cost borne by the state to upskill labor versus the cost borne by the state to promote a special economic zone?
Actually, I don't see any kind of cost benefit analysis. But if you look at Southeast Asia, we all know that's a kind of manufacturing hub and all that, and it is due to special economic zones and blah. But actually, they are also struggling with the skilling of their labor. I mean, it's a kind of problem that they are also facing. Of course, they are better than because they are, of course, relatively more developed. So whether you see, and there is also a problem of spillovers. This is, this entire problem of human capital comes when the spillovers don't occur, you see. And they have the problem, like, if you look at Penang is the hub of electronics, that. So all brands are there, but they are still dependent on foreign companies. Their own companies are not, of course, there are startups and all that, but they don't make a mark. They are not a kind of brands, Malaysia started its own automobile. I mean, they started their own car. It never worked. Thailand is a hub of automobile. That all these Japanese companies, any company you name, and it is there. But they could not really develop their own capability of promoting their own car. So these spillover effects are really, I mean, they are still depending on foreign investment all the time. So they are attracting foreign investment, creating more and more special economic zones. If you look at Indonesia, huge benefits are being given now. The new variety of special economic zones are set up. And if you see the literature, and actually I have a report on that, which is online available, which shows how much benefits, 20 years benefit, you see, 20 years, up to 20 years benefit, they are giving tax benefit. So this is what but then, I feel that this is where actually, they have to really more focus on seeing that, there is upgrading of human capital, and so that there is a sort of spillover effects from these zones to outside, and there should be a kind of, dynamism created. That dynamism is not there, whatever image we have. But actually it is not there. That Malaysia is not getting into high income category. It is called to be trapped in middle income category. So Thailand is trapped in middle income category. So this shift from this to higher, it is important, and this requires, technological prowess. This requires skilling. This requires human capital. So I think, yeah. So I'm very sure. Actually, this is my strong belief after seeing the experience of these countries. So, but of course, I would like to see any cost-benefit analysis. I haven't seen that.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. There's Vinod who has posted some questions. Vinod, Vinod, can you just tell us your question? Vinod?
Yes, sir. Are you able to hear my voice, sir?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Nice presentation, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm having two questions. One with respect to the structural transformation. We are having SEGs towards structural transformation. Now, countries like India, we are implementing PLI schemes and other similar schemes, and with tax incentive structures. Can that be a mechanism for the structural transformation kind of, for example, services to manufacturing side?
Actually, this is what the government makes you believe, that it is going to benefit, and there is no cost benefit analysis. Again, I would say there is no comparative analysis. But as a kind of person who is working on special economic zones for so long, I feel that I mean, I don't know whether I'm right or not. First of all, this is my own personal view, that if these benefits had been given in SEZs, in a wider section of companies, and if smaller and medium enterprises, look, everyone says that our original EPZs, 7 original EPZs, which were small and which were actually owned by the public sector, they are the failure. Most people believe that. But actually, in my book, I don't know how many of you've seen that, 2012 Oxford University Social and Economic Impacts, where I have shown that how this entire thing of promoting small and medium enterprises within SEZs really worked at that time. So I think that you need to really see how you can bring those within the fold of SEZs, which is not there now. They are meant for large firms. Okay. So I mean, these benefits, if you really promote supply chains rather than just giving them to, few companies. So if you just try to promote the supply chains, identify which supply chains, many companies, still remember, it is an old story, but I think this still is true, that, I was interviewing these special economic zone entrepreneurs in 2011, and, they told me that we thought that India had developed value chains within the country, but when we came here, we found that they don't have. So it means that, you have to really, I mean, this Taiwan model actually is just amazing to study, where they have actually shown how these small and medium enterprises can be promoted through SECs. I mean, they became the powerhouse of special economic zone. I think that's a very interesting case to study. So to me, I mean, this is my personal view. I haven't worked on PLI. Let me just be very clear. So before quoting me, you must keep that in mind that I haven't worked on PLI, but I know that PLI is given to certain, big companies. And I actually have my own doubts whether this can actually lead to this not GVC, but value chains within the country. The promotion of value chains within the, I mean, I have my own doubts on that. Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm having one more follow-up question. You mentioned about a regulatory sandbox type of mechanism with respect to the SEGs, in the context of this policy making. Is there any specific case like any of the countries that have implemented this type of methodology, like regulatory sandbox type, to check that policy measures that matches to the SEGs and the implementation part?
No, I haven't seen. Actually, I haven't seen, I mean, people actually don't do much analysis of the studies. I mean, it is like, it has become very fascinating to promote SEZs. So they just use this, Chinese SEZs as the prototype. And they try to replicate that according to their institutions, and their conditions. So this is what is happening. So I don't, I think that this is something which I have shown how, I mean, I have actually looked at the evolutionary process of these policies. And I mean, it is, you may find it interesting. Actually, I felt that it was a very interesting thing because I learned many things during this write-up, how the contexts affected, how the broader policies, how the politics affected, in fact, the special economic zone policy. And, it had never been a kind of stable policy, whether except in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, you had a big, huge, unstable politics period, 91 onwards to 2009. But over this period, they did not really let SEZ affect to that extent. Yeah. Whereas in other countries, politics affected, whether it was Sri Lanka, whether it is India, you know the story. So yeah, so I think this evolutionary process and understanding how and whether they can really contribute to your growth is important, and to see whether the design fit is the is like consistent with what you want to achieve. But I have never seen, I mean, yeah, so far as SEZs are concerned, there are broad guidelines how to develop SEZs, what to keep in mind, and things like that. I think this is what your question was.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you. I think we are out of time now. So I would like to thank Professor Agarwal again for a very enriching discussion. And we definitely learned a lot today. It was not just an academic presentation, but there were a lot of real life examples and very rich experiences. Thank you, ma'am. And I'll now end this webinar. Thank you all for attending this webinar. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohapatra, for this opportunity. I really loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ugh.